Welcome to Just One Thing for Parents. I'm Bettina Honan. Today, I interviewed Manuela Sapochnik, who is a clinical psychologist and also a family therapist. And we talked about this really interesting question of how, when we work with couples who are parents, we can have a really positive impact on families and ultimately on children. So she tells us about how she has progressed in her work to finding this such a helpful way to work with families. We talk about attachment theory. We talk about how the patterns that play out as a couple can impact on our kids and on their attachment relationships. I think it's such an interesting episode, which really is thinking about how we can offer our kids a really secure base camp from which to grow and learn. So please continue to listen to my interview with Manuela Sapochnik. So welcome to Just One Thing for Parents. Thank you, Manuela, so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So the topic that we're covering, or the kind of question that you're going to be helping us to understand, is how working with a couple helps us in our parenting. And I wonder if you could start by just saying why you think this is such an important area.
Yes, absolutely. I have been working with children and families and parents and couples kind of in that order of progression for 20 years. And I started as a child psychologist working with primary school age kids and realized that I spent my whole time with their parents and I liked kids. So I progressed into moving with teenagers thinking, great, I'll just have the kids then. And then I realized that actually to make any change that would be sustained for the teenagers, I had to work with the system around them, which was the family, foster family, adoptive family, biological family, school, care homes, wherever they are embedded, to make a system that could receive and support the changes that they were making. So I trained as a family therapist, and then I started doing lots of work with families and often realizing that a huge amount of the difficulty was emanating from the parenting partnership in whichever shape that was at the time. So I started doing parenting work as an adjunct to the child family work. And I would all come into a session and I would sit and say, right, let's talk about parenting. And there'll be this explosion between them. I slowly began to recognize was about their couple relationship. And then I was at a trauma conference and I heard someone talking about how couples therapy is an incredibly effective way to do trauma work. And all these bits came together because I did a lot of trauma work with kids and trauma work with families. And I realized that if I could help the couples to help each other to do some really deep work in front of each other, with each other, supporting each other on the trauma that they were each holding, that created a securely attached couple who could become parents, who could create secure attachments for their children. And it's a kind of a trickle-down effect from the couple to the parenting, to the whole family, to the kids. And now I find that sometimes parents will come to me and say, I need help with my 4-year-old who's acting out all over the place. And I say, great, let's take a couple of sessions to get to know the history. And in there talking to me, we'll discover that maybe there's some parenting work to do. And in the parenting work, we'll do some couples work. And after the couples work, we'll come back to the parenting work. And then the parenting work works much better. And then, however many months in, I might say, right, back to the kid. How are they? And I often get, they're fine now.
Right. Oh, interesting. Gosh.
So I kind of think of it as a way of helping people to stop transmitting what we call transgenerational trauma, which is such an important thing because none of us have children wanting to pass on our difficult stuff. And yet we all do to a certain degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so what you're saying is that we're trying to help the child, and often parents will come to us saying, my child is struggling. It can really be at any age. And what you're saying is that in the work that you're doing, you're you have found out over many years of working with families that actually, if you can help the couple and the parenting, first of all, that does something for the whole system. So then often the child's problems are reduced.
I kind of think of it as if people come to me and say, I've got this very tall building and the top floor is really wobbly. Help me with the very wobbly top floor. And I say, yes, come in. Let's talk about your wobbly top floor. But how's the floor underneath? And how's the one under that? And how are the foundations of this building doing?
Yeah.
And I think, when it's done in an unblaming and gentle way, this happens to all of us way, because it does, including all the psychologists who work in this area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then everybody sort of sees the sense of working from the foundation up. And actually, you can spend years trying to fix the wobbly top building, but if you've got wobbly foundations, you're only ever going to get a little bit of progress, and it will probably unprogress itself quite rapidly.
Yeah.
The foundation starts shaking again.
And the couple is the foundation. It's almost like it's the base camp, isn't it?
Yeah.
From which the child is functioning. Yeah, absolutely. So when you say you do couples work, what does that look like?
So the model that I favour is called emotionally focused couples therapy. It is very based in the neuroscience of attachment. And
can you say a little about what attachment is? I think a lot of people know, but maybe everybody doesn't.
So attachment is the thing that humans and most mammals do, at least between parents and children. It is an innate, writer I like says, we're born to bond. Humans are mammals that are born to bond. Bonding keeps us safe. And the less functional we are when we're born, the more important the bond is. An antelope can run at 30 seconds and the kids are still trying to figure out how to walk when they're about 2.
Yeah.
So what keeps a human child safe is that super close relationship to the primary caregiver. And attachment is the biological imperative to seek out that bond with the primary caregiver. And we first do it with our primary caregivers. And it used to be something that was only thought about in terms of children and their parents. But actually, our attachment relationships continue to follow us through life. We form them with our intimate partners. We form them with our siblings, with our friends, and very importantly, with our children. The shape of your attachment behaviors, or I like to think of them as your attachment dance, you carry them through life with you. And if we are unaware of them, then things keep happening to us in a similar pattern. We don't understand why the same thing keeps happening to us. And a good piece of therapy, I think, is about helping people understand their part in the dance. And it comes from what we have inside us that we got from our childhoods, but it comes out in what we do with the important people around us. So emotionally focused therapy, to come back to the start of the question, looks at how the attachment patterns that we hold in us play out in our everyday lives with the people around us. So it's a lovely melding of attachment science and systemic between people science. So it's internal therapy and external therapy, inside us and between us. And when couples are in distress, it's often because their attachment behaviors are misattuned, and they are accidentally pushing each other further away with their cries, with their proximity-seeking behaviors, are accidentally creating distance. And I think we can all relate to the idea that when I really need you is when you're most not there, when things aren't going well. And when things are going well, when I really need you is when you're most there.
Yeah.
And actually helping couples see how we call it the more. A cycle is the more. The more you, the more I. The more you, the more I. So when we identify our the more pattern, everybody can sort of step down and step back and think, well, what can I do differently? And what does I actually need from you? And maybe at our age, it might be a bit late to create a new attachment blueprint with our parents, but it's never too late to create a new attachment blueprint with our partners, because brains are plastic. we feel safe and secure with our partners, we physiologically react really differently to the world.
Mm.
And then we can pass that on to our children by creating a secure attachment with them who are still young enough for us to create that, change that.
I love that. And one of the most stressful things in the world is when our children are distressed or when there's something that we worry about with our child. And so you can see how easily we're already in that kind of fight or flight if we've got a child who even shows beginnings of some kind of distress, which children are bound to do at some point. And then that plays out in the couple.
And doing the couples work, it's really interesting how it also helps us then see what we do with our children, because in the couple it's very evident, and it's hopefully a kind of an even power scenario where you're not the fully responsible one. You can be half responsible with your partner, and you can see, I do this, they do that, I do this. And we learn about our own patterns of behaviors. And then when we go to do our parenting, we can notice that we probably have a similar urge, whether we move forward into the distressing things or whether we protect ourselves by moving away from the distressing things. And in the parenting paradigm, it's much more on the parent to shift the dynamic.
Yes, yes.
But if you can learn about it in the safer space of your couple, you can do it in the harder space of your parenting.
Wow. That's so powerful. And I love what you say, that we all have these patterns. There's not some idea that some people struggle and other people don't. As you say, all of us, even us therapists who study this stuff, we all struggle. This is about human relationships.
And I really like saying to my couples, so we're going to map out your patterns, and one of you is going to go left and one of you is going to go right. And there's no point beating yourself up about it, because humans only have two options. We all either go left or right. So let's just figure out if we're a left turner or a right turner.
Amazing.
And then see what we can do about that, where it serves us and where it doesn't.
Yeah, I really love that. So it's really about being brave enough to reflect on yourself and to think about, what is my pattern, not to blame yourself, to be very self-compassionate, to see this as something that's just part of being human, and then to try to change it. Is it hard to change?
It definitely takes time and repeated attempts, but it's kind of like anything, really. I think, like, the teenagers I used to work with were very funny and would say things to me like, "Oh, miss, I get it. You don't get a six-pack by thinking about going to the gym. Is that what?" That's what I mean. You've got to keep going. So all of these things, they're not an event. They're a process and a practice and a thing we have to keep doing. You have to keep exercising to be fit. You have to keep eating healthily to feel healthy. Any of these things are practices that we keep working with.
Yeah. So it's in the doing. What makes it hard for parents, do you think?
Time to be able to stop and slow down and reflect. I think having a protected space, that one of the things that I think therapy is really helpful for is just, here's your hour a week or your hour a fortnight to come in and stop and turn your phone off. Think about you, or you and your partner, or you and the kids. So definitely space and time in our overcrowded world. But also I think that we live in a very virtually connected world and lost some of the practical, real life, solid physical connections, and that connections make humans feel safe. And so when we don't feel safe, we shift into our threat response patterns, because attachment style tends to show itself most when we feel in any way threatened or unsafe. So you've got your attachment pattern is like this when you're okay, but when something difficult happens, it gets bigger. And when things are really difficult, you swing out into the extremes of your attachment pattern. So feeling unconnected, not having time, feeling rushed, living in these very nuclear families rather than having the villages that we used to have around us. Make it hard.
Yeah. And I suppose sometimes you might get one couple who's more willing or able to do the work than the other.
Do you mean one of the two people?
Yeah.
Almost invariably,
Yeah.
one partner will contact me and say, I think it would be really good for us to have some couples therapy. And my partner's not so keen. And sort of classical model couples therapy is like, no, you've got to get them both in, even on the first introductory phone call from the beginning. But pragmatically, what I found is actually I've just got to get them both in the room.
Yeah.
I've got to help the one who is not so keen feel that there's something useful they can get from it. But interestingly, I'd say 90% of the time, once the process starts, the less keen partner becomes very engaged.
Yeah. Wow. That's really nice. And I think just hearing you speak about it, it's incredibly compassionate and inclusive. And it make people fear they're going to be judged or blamed or, it's because they're a bad parent or something like that. And it's really not about that, is it? It's about exploration and being curious.
And I ask permission when people come to me about a child. I always explain, I need the background. I need to talk to preferably both parents first, and then if we decide that actually some parenting work would be really helpful, strategies to help manage the difficult things that are going on. And I see them struggling to support each other in implementing the strategies, or even agreeing on the strategies, or even having the conversations with me, then I just tend to very gently ask, would it be okay to just talk about this space between the two of you? Yeah. So sometimes couples therapy occurs as a progression from coming for help about your child. Sometimes couples come to me directly looking for couples work. But always one of the big motivators, if they have children, is we want to make because the emotional tone in a household has a really big impact on kids. And I do think parents are very aware of that. And they come and they want help to shift the emotional tone. We want to be happier. We want to be more joyful. We want to have more fun with our kids. And we also say, even if in the end you decide to split up, you're going to do it in a much better way for your family than if you didn't work through this stuff first.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's so helpful. So just before we end, is there anything you feel like you haven't said that feels really important on this topic?
I guess I want to give a big shout out to all the single parents out there, because I think single parents are superheroes.
Yeah.
And perhaps say, if you're a single parent, getting to know yourself is just as valuable as getting to know your couple. That work on understanding your attachment style is still a brilliant intervention for you and your children.
Yeah. Wow.
You get to hand down a secure attachment. And all the research I think pretty much ever done in child psychology shows that a secure attachment is the single most protective thing that you can give your children for mental health difficulties, but also for physical health difficulties. It makes them less likely to happen. And if and when they do happen, they have less of an impact.
Yeah. And whether they're single parents or a couple who are parenting together, often you can be breaking a pattern that has been there for generations, can't you? So it can feel really hard sometimes. Yeah.
I think the multi-generational thing is really helpful as well, because it helps us, I think, when we can explain it well, realize it's not me, there's nothing wrong with me, there was difficult stuff that happened to me. And even to look back to our parents and think, it wasn't them, it's not them, it's difficult stuff that happened to them. And pass it back.
Yes.
And then
no one's to blame.
then there will almost always have been really difficult things that happened in the world. There will have been wars and refugees and political migrations and losses. And, I do believe that all humans are doing the best they can at any point. And when we're not, it's because something's getting in our way.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we could end, I could ask you if there's just one bit of advice you have for parents when they're thinking about this, particular area and work, thinking about themselves as a couple and how it impacts on their parenting. If there's just one bit of advice you could give them, what would it be?
Your coupleness is worth the effort. Putting the effort into your coupleness has ripples out to everybody in your family.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. Manuela, thank you so much for your time today. It's been so interesting. It's going to be really helpful for families.
You're very welcome. It was lovely to speak to you. Thank you for having me on.